Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. I am Jen Bluske, and we are so excited for you to join us today about setting our kids up for success in the summer. We are talking about this topic, which can bring up a lot of emotions for families, especially when we might be parenting a neurodivergent or highly sensitive child. For many parents, camp can feel like a tug of war between wanting our kids to have rich, joyful experiences and worrying if the staff will get them, if the child will feel safe and seen, and what will happen if our kids get overwhelmed, misunderstood, or struggle with some behaviors. So we're going to dive into how to set our kids up and how to set the camp staff up for success through thoughtful communication, planning, and true partnership. Today, we are joined by Gale. Jamie is an experienced educator and has been a camp person forever. Jamie co-founded and directs Creative Soul Camp to bring her yoga program, Little Om Big Om, to Madison area youth, along with other specialty creative arts enrichment opportunities. Jamie is also the director of Creative Soul After School Club and Mosaic After School Club, as well as the owner and co-director of a kids yoga teacher training, Meet Me in Child's Pose, and a camp counselor training, The Star Counselor. She also owns the podcast network, Lit Path Studios, and the professional and personal development company, Boss Mama, and is the mom of 3 awesome teenagers. Whew, Jamie, you are busy. Welcome, Jamie.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
Happy to have you. So let's get started by having you tell us a little bit about your summer camp and your role there.
Yes. So I am the director of Creative Soul Camp. We are a summer day camp that is focused on enrichment and creativity for kids between the ages of 6 and 13. We're going into our 10th summer, and every day at camp, our campers get programming in 4 different content areas that are in the creative arts enrichment sphere. So they get yoga, they get art, they get cooking, and they get drama/improv every day. So our campers rotate through those activities, and then at the end of each session, we put on a big family showcase for the families to kind of see what they're creating during the week. And one thing that I think is helpful to understand about our camp is that while there's so many specialty camps that teach the very specific fundamentals and foundations and skills within each content area, and they're really focused on, the final product. Like, for example, in a drama program, they're really focused on the final production. We are much more focused on the process and on letting kids express their creativity in it. And so there is such a need for the other types of programs, but we're just a little bit different. We just really focus on getting kids exposed to and confident in expressing their creativity in the different areas.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And so what we're thinking about today is if a family is listening and they have a child who is neurodivergent, maybe highly sensitive, in your 10 years, what has your experience been of kids finding some success or, the kids who have joined your camp who may be neurodivergent or highly sensitive?
Yeah. So we embrace and celebrate all different types of kids and grownups, our counselor staff and our leadership staff and our campers. We all are, different and unique, and that's wonderful. And as a creative arts camp, we tend to get the kids who maybe aren't going for the super sports camp and aren't going for maybe the all day, all summer long summer day camp. We do tend to serve kids who are looking for something a little different, and that tends to attract a group of kids with a wide variety of different needs and different skills and different abilities, which is awesome. And one reason that I'm really glad that we're talking today is because we are a summer day camp. We're an enrichment program. We get to know these kids for a week at a time. And so I think we've gotten an interesting look at how kids can come into our program that we've never known, and that they can, be there for 4 days. And we've learned a lot about what makes that a successful setup and what sometimes doesn't work as well. And so what we have seen is that when parents are very communicative with us about what their kid might need during their time with us, that we're able to have those conversations with families about what can we do and what aren't we able to do, and then how we can set everybody up for success so that it is a really fun, playful, creative week where everybody has a wonderful experience. So, so many camps can serve a wide variety of kids with a wide variety of needs, but I have found that getting set up correctly between the families and the camps is really what makes that child's experience really the best it can possibly be at camp.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And for so many parents who I think are listening, and for so many parents who I work with this time of year, we're recording this in the spring when everybody's signing up for summer camps and kind of figuring out what the summer can look like for their kids. And I feel like I hear so many families who are very, very torn, nervous, because they really want their child to have, this really fun, joyful, connected summer, right? With some social experiences and some activity. And then also knowing that sometimes that can feel maybe overwhelming or fraught with not knowing the unknowns and all of that. And I think that there's this place, and we can sort of dig into it in this conversation, to be incredibly thoughtful, right? Incredibly thoughtful about how do we support parents and camp directors and all of those involved to create that success, right? For the kids and for everybody. So everybody feels really good about it. And the first thing you brought up is communication. And I would presume, as in most camp settings, is there's some sort of like initial information sharing that all campers do. From your experience, what's the most successful thing parents have done in order to really set their kids up for success at the beginning?
This is such a good question. And I will start by actually, before that communication happens, I think it's really important. And I hope there are some camp directors or other educators out there listening in addition to parents. And I think it's really important. One thing that I have seen work really well is when everybody assumes best intent. When the parents are assuming that their camp directors, the camp staff, certainly the camp counselors that are pouring their hearts into the campers each day, are really looking to give all the campers a really wonderful experience. And people who work at camp, I will tell you, it is not the easiest job in the world. No. But people that are there because they love camp and they see the value in camp for kids. And we in the camp industry are doing this because we want to give kids an opportunity outside of the school system, outside of the demands of academic needs, outside of those things. There's a phrase that camp is a community, an emotional community, and that is so true. And so I think it's important for parents to recognize that camps and camp staff and camp counselors are there to do their best, and that they're coming at this, how do we make camp the most successful? And likewise, camp counselors and camp directors, and I want to touch back on your communication question, because I think at the crux of this to make it successful is the communication. But for camp staff and camp leaders to realize that parents also are there with the best intent. They are looking to give their kid an escape from, school, from the demands of other things. They want their kid to be successful. And so I think that that's a really important background piece to realize we're not there to fight against each other, but we're there to work together. And so when there is communication that needs to happen between camp directors and camp families, that everybody looks at it like a project to work on together. And that the more we can work on it together, the more successful it's going to be for their kids. And what does this look like in practice? So, this is a twofold. There's two parts of responsibility of this. One, the camps need to ask the questions. What about the kids? I think 10 years in, I can tell you, we used to feel like, okay, we're not going to ask specific questions about kids' needs or if they have 504s or IEPs in schools, because we just want to take everybody and we want to include everybody and we're going to handle whatever it is. And I've learned over the past decade that it is essential to ask those questions up front, to get to know as much as we can about the campers coming in, both from a standpoint of preparing to get the staff to understand what the campers might need, but also then to have some of those conversations with families. If we look at somebody's intake information and we have questions, we want to understand more. What does this look like in practice? Someone lists a diagnosis on a form. Okay, interesting. What does that mean for camp? It could mean something completely different from school. Or it could be, this is actually going to show up exactly the way at camp that it does at school. And so we need to be prepared. And sometimes, and I'm sure we'll go there, it's the camp's responsibility to say, this is not something that we have the capacity to accommodate in a way that will best support your kid. And so how can we problem solve that? Is there some outside group that can come support us? All of that. But to answer the flip side of that, parents, and I also am a parent of neurodivergent kids. And so they've grown out of the camp phase, but I can completely understand the protective gut reflex of guarding information about your kids so that they don't go into camp with, a stigma or an expectation that they're going to be a certain way, because we don't know what's going to show up. As parents, we don't know what's going to show up at camp for our kids. But it is essential that parents provide the information to the camps, send the 504, send the IEP plan, add a paragraph about how things look for their kid. Maybe not so much during the academic time, but what does it look like at recess? What does it look like at lunchtime? What does it look like when the energy gets high in the classroom for your kid? So really getting detailed about what this might look like at camp and then what can help your kid. That was sort of a broad answer, but I think it's a dual responsibility between the camps and the parents to over ask and overshare so that it can be a project that everybody can work on together to make the camp successful for these camp counselors, for the campers, and for that family's camper. It's a cohesive organism. And so just making sure that we can be on the same page is the most important piece.
I mean, I think that is so powerful. I think that, there's sometimes this idea of we're just going to hope for the best, and I like your idea of thinking of it like a project so that we can sort of create a smooth path, right, for the campers so that everything, if there's bumps along the way, there's bumps along the way, but we have the information to know what to do or how to respond in a way that might be most useful for the camper.
And, parents, I think it might be helpful if we kind of talk about what does a camp do with that information, right? So as a summer day camp, we're an enrichment camp. We serve kids 6 and up. So we're out of that really young age group. We don't have preschoolers in our camp right now. And so when we receive that information, let's just take, for example, a family that says, my kid might need a sensory break from time to time.
Yeah.
Then the camper with that can look and say, okay, what counselors am I putting with your camper, right? So they can look and staff the people who maybe are more familiar with that. Then we can reach out to the family and say okay, what does this look like? How will we know when your camper needs a sensory break? If it is that they are exploding and running out of the classroom, okay, we need to be prepared for that or discuss what we need to do to be prepared for that. Or we need to say, we're going to need to put an extra person here so that if a counselor does need to follow a camper out of the room, that we're not leaving the other campers short-staffed, that kind of thing. And then we can reach out to the family and say, when should we reach out to you? We can have those conversations. It allows us to plan and prepare and educate our camp staff. The reality is that camps, besides the professional camp directors and often professional leadership team, are staffed by high school and college kids who love children and love camp and whose hearts are in the right place, and they are young and might not have the experience of your school para team or your school providers or your outside providers. That doesn't mean they don't want to help. It just means that we might need to educate them, or we might as a camp need to be educated if a child has something that we have not come across before. So when I say project, that's what I mean. To really look at it as an opportunity to be ahead of the situation so
Yeah.
that we on day 2 are not like, okay, how do we handle this? We have
Right.
no notes on this child. The parent told us nothing. Clearly they need something. We don't know what they need or how they're going to respond. And so it's now we're into the camp session and we're behind. We're not properly staffed
Mhm.
and we're not ready for the situation.
Yeah. And I think like when I look at this from like the lens of the child, right? And when we're looking at, felt safety and connection and all of the things that kids need, that allows the child to, even if things get tricky, the child to be safe, know that they can
Mhm.
rely on an adult, The adults, like you said, are amazing and love children. But if the adult doesn't have any history or know what to do, that might feel really challenging for the child as well.
Totally. And these are sometimes not even adults. A lot of camp
Right.
counselors are
Good point.
teens, right? And so I
Yeah.
do think that's different. It's something to really remember and really think about
Mhm.
that these are also young adults or teens that are figuring it out, and it's an opportunity also to make an impact on those young adults and those teens to
Mhm.
learn because they're going to love your kid.
Mhm.
And so the more we can help them understand your kid, the better that they can show care. And we call it camp love to your kid. So I think yeah, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I love that. So I do want to get just a bit granular and specific
Absolutely.
around communication because I do think for folks listening, both
Hmm.
on the parent side and potentially on the camp director side, how do we want parents to be initially sharing this information? I know that, oftentimes parents have a wealth of knowledge on their
Hmm.
children, right? And there periodically could be perceptions that the wealth of knowledge might feel like a demand to the camp. What do you find is the most useful way,
Hmm.
the level, I guess, of information
Hmm.
that parents can share that's useful from your perspective?
So the pieces of information that we now ask directly as a camp, but many camps don't. And I would say that this goes along with any enrichment program that your kid might be in, whether it's a soccer class or, a dance class, anything like that, an art class. The pieces of information that we find the most helpful are to know, does your child have a 504 or IEP that might be relevant for their time at camp? So I know I mentioned that before, but
Mhm.
during and especially our camp, we do programming, formal programming. And so like what might your kid need during the formal programming and what might your kid need during the transition times, during the lunch hour, during our free play time, anything like that. And then the other piece is, does your child have any one-on-one support, additional one-on-one support during the school day? That's really, really critical for us to understand. Even if the answer is yes, only during math class in order to interpret the numbers, that's helpful for us because we can say, okay, then that's probably not relevant here.
Mhm.
Or, for example, if they have a dyslexia diagnosis and they need help with reading, okay, well, during our drama, when we're doing our skits, we might want to make sure that there's a staff member that's sitting with them. And so we can
Support the reading.
that's an easy accommodation.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's something that we can do. If your child needs help going to the bathroom, that is something we also need to know because, for example, at our camp, that's not something that we can support. So then we would need to reach out to the family and have that discussion about, can they provide a one-on-one? There are organizations. We live in Madison, Wisconsin. There are wonderful organizations that can provide, aids or one-on-one support for campers to attend camps. So yes, is there any additional help that your child gets from an adult during the school day or in their other programming? To share that openly with us.
Mhm.
The other thing, is there anything else that we need to know about your family? Or, for example, and this is maybe not relevant to a diagnosis, but like, is your family going through a big transition? That's
Yeah.
something that's super helpful for us to know as a camp so that we can be sensitive about anything we notice or extra communicative with you. So as far as how should a family share that,
Yeah.
if the camp is not asking those things
Yeah.
outright on registration, then sending an email to the camp director with hey, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about my kid.
Mhm.
If you want to include a photo so that they can, when they see your kid in the hallway, we have our camp that has 400 kids a summer. And so, right. So as the camp director, I don't have an opportunity to get to know each camper the
Right.
way that I did when we had 40 kids a summer, 10
Yeah.
years ago. And so including a photo of your camper, giving a little background information about what they're like, what their interests are, what they really don't like, what are signs or symptoms that they might be not doing well, right? So I would call these, one of my children was in this situation when they were in elementary school, I would say, here are some like little red flag things that things might be escalating inside of them, and so if you notice these things, here are some things that you can do to help to calm things down for them before it becomes an issue during the programming.
Yes.
So going to get a drink of water, taking, a break in the corner, just giving them a second to answer questions, whatever it is, even those little tiny cues that work at home. Other things that are helpful for us to know as a camp director in that email are, what are some common language things that you use at home? And maybe these are skills that you learn from occupational therapy. Or maybe they're just words that have become part of the family. Like if there's going to be a change in the schedule in your family, call it a zigzag. Hey, there's a zigzag in the schedule. Well, if as a camp, we can know that that's going to help your child understand that something has changed from the visual schedule that you wrote out for them before camp started, that's helpful for us to know. We can note that, their counselor can learn that, and then use that during the camp day. So an email with probably more details than you think are necessary to share is helpful. And then the camp director can triage that information. At our camp, we do a daily debrief where before camp, we share any notes that came in from the families about things that their kids might need or things that their kids particularly enjoyed. And so the camp can then read that to the staff so that they can be prepared for the kids. So
it's amazing.
If the camp doesn't ask those questions, volunteer that information.
I love it.
And frankly, one other thing I'll add is if the camp doesn't want that information, that is something for you to note as a parent. If the camp is like uninterested and thinks they can just handle everything and they're not going to ask any questions, and your kid is going to need a little extra something, that should give you pause, in my opinion. And not that they're a bad camp or not that the camp director is bad. It just might not be the right place for your child to have a successful camp experience.
Exactly. I love that. So let's talk about with all of the positive communication that we are working on and supporting parents with and helping the camp with, when things don't go well, right? Things sort of melt down, fall apart. We have a hard day. From your perspective, what's the most supportive things that parents can do? Because, right, that's a really uncomfortable situation, right? For the camp, for the kid, for the parent, it's uncomfortable. What are the things parents can do in those moments?
So again, I think it goes back to this assuming best intent. And of course, that is not always going to be the case that everybody's trying their best. But if you start with the assumption that the camp has already done what they can do before they reach out to you, they have tried what is within their wheelhouse or their skill set, the counselors have tried, and they reach out to a parent to say, hey, we're having a tough day. This is not going well. I would encourage families to start by listening first and ask for information about what has been happening. And it might be that the family can, in those moments, offer a suggestion that might help to redirect. We always, when we reach out to a family to let them know that a day is not going well, we are always looking for suggestions from the family about how we can improve the situation for the camper. We are never starting with like, we're done. We're out. Pick up your camper and take them home. We're always starting with, what can we do? So if the family can offer some suggestions, that is very, very helpful. If you know that your camper really might need more, or maybe it's not the right fit, sometimes calling it on the day and regrouping for the next day is really the best thing, so that the camper can have the best chance of being successful the next day. And that's not a failure of the child, and it's not a failure of the camp. It's really just, like you mentioned at the beginning, camp is a time of a lot of new.
So much new.
There's new people, a new setting, new rules, new expectations. And that is a lot for any child, let alone one who does well in a consistent, predictable situation. And it doesn't mean that it's not worth the try, but sometimes being able to call it on the day, offering suggestions and hearing, really, I think, just coming at it from that a project mentality as much as possible. Sometimes it's not going to work out. And that is just the reality. It is not a school. And I think that is one thing that as a camp we've gotten better at over the years, is identifying what we are and what we are not. Yeah. And we are not a school. We are not equipped with the type of staffing and expertise. We don't have OTP to mental health on our staff. And so sometimes it is a situation where everybody needs to acknowledge that what is best for that camper is to not be in that situation. And that is a last resort.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it is recognizing that this round didn't work. It doesn't mean that it's not worth trying again in the future or getting set up in a different way. Maybe the camper can come back a different session and with a little bit more preparation. They've now seen it. The family can foreshadow more. We can set things up differently. There can be somebody there additionally to support. So it's a last resort. But I think starting with assuming best intent that everybody's doing their best, to offering suggestions or offering to come help or drop off a favorite, if a child, you thought that your child wasn't going to need their headphones at camp, but it turns out they do, offering to come bring those and give that a try. And then also knowing when it is not working and acknowledging that it is not working, I think is also, it's a hard situation, but it is also important.
Yeah, I think it really is. And Jamie, you had alluded earlier in this conversation that at least in our Madison area, there are organizations that can provide one-on-one support for kids to be able to have more success, right? In that camp setting.
And when we know that in advance that a camper does likely need one-on-one support during the camp day, that allows the camp to have a conversation with the family like, hey, here are some organizations that you can reach out to that might be able to send someone. And that has allowed many campers to be extremely successful at camp when otherwise our young staff, and even on their best days, are not going to be able to, and we don't have the capacity to support kids one-on-one if they need truly one-on-one support during the whole camp day. We want to say that clearly to families because we don't want families to think we can offer something that we can't, but we are always willing to work with these outside organizations. There are some wonderful organizations locally who will provide, whether it's just an extra set of hands, more like a volunteer, all the way up through, skilled support for the camper. So, yeah.
I love that. If there's one thing that you can say to camp staff themselves about working with neurodivergent, sensitive kids, what do you wish every counselor knew?
That's a great question. One of the exercises that we do during our camp training each year is that we have the camp counselors close their eyes and remember a camp experience or a class experience from when they were in elementary school. Most of our campers are elementary or younger middle school. And to remember a time when they were really, really happy and really, really upset, some of their favorite memories from when they were that age and some of their toughest memories from when they were that age. And to remember how intense that felt for them, how big those things felt in both positive and negative. And really to remember how, look at all these years later, they can still recall it in a moment. And to really remember that each camper that is in their group is having that big of an experience for themselves in the camp group. Here we are, a camp staff, and we are all have such vastly different memories and needs and preferences and things that light us up and things that crush our soul. And that campers are coming with the same range, that they are, so cute and so fun. And as a camp group, you are just trying to kind of wrangle the group and get them to the programming and all of that. But that each camper individually is having a unique experience that they will remember. And so I think that comes for all campers, but especially when you're talking about campers who may be neurodiverse, may have different needs, different abilities. And so to really consider the impact on each child's experience. And the other thing I would say to camp staff is if you are not sure about a situation, ask. Your leadership team at your camp directors are doing this because they love it. They love camp. People that work in the camp industry, it's a passion. And so if you are unsure how to handle a situation, I guarantee you that your camp leadership wants you to ask for help. So ask the family at pickup if there's suggestions, ask the questions. Don't feel like you have to go alone. That's a really important piece of it.
I love it. Jamie, how can families learn more about your camp if they're interested?
Our camp is called Creative Soul Camp, and you can find out more at www.creativesoulcamp.com or on Facebook or Instagram at Creative Soul Camp is the handle. And my email is linked on the website, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll also give a little note that if you are somebody who has graduated from camp or you might want to be a camp counselor, something, excites you about it, I also have a camp counselor training with another colleague who's another camp director locally here in the Madison, Wisconsin area. And that is called the Star Counselor. And that's a great way to learn more about how to give kids of all different needs and abilities great camp experiences. So I'll just share that as a resource as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen.
If this episode spoke to you, we want to let you know that we are offering a new opportunity at Thriving Parents Collective, our deepening parent community. This is a membership community where you can work with a group of like-minded parents to deepen into the practice of parenting with the guidance from both Shannon and I. If you are interested, check out the link in the show notes. We would love to have you. Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.